You can draw this in Procreate. You can draw this tropical scene in Procreate by just using the brushes that are already in the Procreate app. I will guide you through every step from the beginning till the end. So be sure to watch the video all the way through and just pause if things are going too fast for you. And once you're finished, don't forget to share your work on Instagram and tag me in the image. That way I will be able to find it and perhaps we'll see your work in the next You Can Draw This video. So what are we waiting for? Let's get started. Our canvas is 2500 by 2500 pixels. And as always, I have created a color palette for you, which you can download for free through the link in the description. First thing we'll do for our project today is go to the background layer. First click the two squares to go to your layer menu and then click background color. And we'll set it to pure black. You can just double tap here at the bottom to select pure black. And now let's go to our first layer, layer 1. And for our brush, we will go to the calligraphy brushes and use the monoline brush. And for the color, let's set it to this orange. Let me just zoom out a little bit and let's create a circle. So just draw a circle, hold your pen in place, and tap one finger on the screen to make it snap to a perfect circle. And now you can go to Edit Shape and move your circle around until it's about in the center of your canvas. And now you can drag in the color. You can drag this colored circle and drag it into your other circle to fill it. Now I can see that we're not entirely centered. Let me move it down just a little bit. You can go to the arrow right here and just move it down a little bit. First thing we'll do is add a gradient, and we'll do that on a separate layer. Let's click the plus to make a new layer, and this one we'll set it to layer clipping mask. Just click the layer and then click clipping mask. Now whatever we paint on this clip layer will only show up on our circle. For the color, we will pick this yellow right here. And the brush, well, we'll set that to the soft brush, which you can find under airbrushing. The opacity of the brush is set to 40% and the brush size is 11%. And I would like to make the center a bit lighter because that's where our sun will be. So that area will be lighter. And just make some horizontal strokes, slowly building up that light. Until you have something like this. And to make the gradient even smoother, you can go to the magic wand right here and select Gaussian blur. Now if you drag with your pen or finger to the right on your screen, you can increase the blur. Let's go for somewhere around 20%. And you can just click the brush to get out of that menu. Next, I'd like to add the water, and we'll do that on a separate layer again. So click the plus. And again, we only want that water to be on our circle. So we will use clipping mask again. Click the layer, then clipping mask, and now whatever we paint will only show up on our circle. Let's go to the selection tool, that's this S-shaped ribbon, and set it to rectangle. Now just click here in the lower left corner and then drag up until you are just below halfway of your circle. Somewhere around here. And let's fill this rectangle that we just created. Let's fill it with this third color in the color palette. Now while the selection is still active, let's use that soft brush and a light color to add a little bit of a gradient here as well. And while the selection is active, we can only paint inside of that selection. So let's just add a little bit of light here in the center of that water. And while the selection is active, we can even use the Gaussian blur. And that way, it'll only get blurred inside of the selection. So let's drag to the right again. And let's just blur it a little bit. Let's say 4%. And let's just turn off the selection and the Gaussian blur menu. For our next step, I would like to add 2 hills. And again, we'll make a new layer for that. So click the plus and use clipping mask. And for our brush, we'll go to the calligraphy brushes and use the monoline brush. And the color, well, we will set that to this brown color over here. I have the brush set to 4% in size, but it doesn't really matter. It's a matter of personal preference. Let's start about here on the left side. Let's go up a little bit. Then make a wobbly line going down to the right until we are a little bit below that horizon. And then we'll go back to the left with a slightly wobbly line. And make sure to close your shape right there. Otherwise, when you start to fill it, it'll spill out over your entire canvas. Let's drag in the color to fill that shape. And then we'll go to the right side. Let me start here right now. We'll go up here with a wobbly line again. And then we'll go back down. Let's go to the right here and then close the shape here. And drag the color in to fill it. And now let's add some sunshine. We'll create a sun on a layer below the water layer. So below layer 3. So we'll go to layer 2 first. Then click the plus to create a new layer. And as you can see, it automatically is set to layer clipping mask, which is great. Now we still have the monoline brush. And for the color, we will go to this bright yellow. And again, just draw a circle. Hold your pen in place. Tap one finger on your screen to make it snap to a perfect circle. And you can use edit shape to drag it around. Let's place it about here and fill it, dragging in the color. Now I would like to blur the sun a little bit. Let's first duplicate the layer by dragging to the left, then select duplicate and go to the bottom layer. I will click the magic wand and use Gaussian blur, and let's slide to the right until we have a nice halo effect around our sun. Let's go for around 20%. And now I want to blur the other layer a bit as well, not too much. So we'll go to the magic wand again, use Gaussian blur, and drag to the right to, let's say, 3.5%. Then just click the brush to get out of the menu. Because that sun is behind those hills will cast a shadow on the water. Let's create that now. We'll go to layer 4, which has the hills on it. And let's drag to the left to duplicate it. Now let's go to that bottom layer and then select the arrow. And here you can click flip vertical. And now our hills are flipped, and we can drag them down like this to create that reflection. Now you can see that this right side, it's not touching, and we do want that. So let's click the arrow again and go to the selection tool. Using freehand right here, we can select that part of the hills and then go to the arrow again to transform it. And let's select distort this time. And let's just drag these handles up until it touches that hill. We can also drag this up a little bit like that. And then just click the arrow to get out of the menu. I will go to the layer palette, to that layer that we just created, click the N and turn down the opacity until you're at around 33%. And the next thing we'll do is blur this layer a bit. So we'll go to the magic wand again, use Gaussian blur, and drag to the right. Just a little bit. Let's go for around 6%. Because of that bright sunlight, light will also hit on those sides of the mountain. I would like to create that right now. So let's go back to the layer palette and create a new layer on top of those hills. Now we only want that light to show up on our mountains. First, let's click the layer and use clipping mask so that whatever we paint will only show up on the circle. But to be sure that it will only show up on the hills, we can click the layer with the hills and use select. Now we have a selection in the shape of those hills. Let's go back to our new layer. And we'll use a different layer blending mode for this one. Let's click the N and set it to screen. This will light up everything on the layer beneath. For our brush, we'll go to airbrushing and use a soft brush. And the color is fine like this. Now let's just gently glaze over those sides of the hills, adding some sunlight to them. So don't go overboard, don't make the entire hill lighter, just those edges. And you can turn off the selection by clicking the S-shaped ribbon again. Now, this is already looking great, but we're not there yet. Let's add a palm tree to our scene. And I want the palm tree to be outside of the circle. So when we create a new layer right now, we don't have to use layer clipping mask. For our brush, we will go to the drawing brushes and use Oberon. And for our color, we'll go for this second color right here. And first, let's create some sand in our foreground. Our brush is set to 5% and the opacity is at 100%. Let's start about here outside of the circle. And let's go up here and then down with a curve until we are outside of the circle again. And on this side, we'll go down with a curve as well until we're closing the shape. And then you can just fill it by coloring it like this. It's giving a nice texture to our sand. And I also want some sand on the inside of the circle. So I'll do that on a layer below this sand layer. First click layer 8, then click the plus. And because we want it to be inside of the circle, we will need to set this layer to clipping mask again. And for the color, we'll use this one in the color palette. And let's just create a little bit of sand here. Just make a curvy shape to give it a little bit more depth. Now it's time for our palm tree. We'll make it on a new layer on top of the sand. Let's click the plus for a new layer. And for the brush, let's still use the Oberon brush. And the color we'll set to this first color in the color palette. First, let's just create the basic curve of our palm tree. Let's just make a curve upward here until it's in front of the sun. And then you can start giving it more volume. Like that, make a curve again. And then I just want to give it some wobbles on the outside. So don't make it look too tidy. So you can have these wobbles on the outside. For some extra texture on our palm tree, we can go to the painting brushes and use the old brush. And for the color, we'll pick this second color right here. And the brush is set to 5% in size and the opacity is at 100%. Let's zoom in just a little bit and let's make these diagonal strokes and give each little segment of the palm tree a little bit of texture until we're all the way up at the top of our palm tree. For our next step, we'll create the leaves of the palm tree and we'll do that on a new layer again. And for our brush, we will go to the inking brushes and use dry ink. And the color we'll use is this one, this third color in the color palette. Now, just in case you are having trouble creating more layers, perhaps Procreate is telling you that there is more than enough layers right now and that you can't create any new ones. What you can do is merge layers that you like, or you can decrease the size of your canvas. You can go to the wrench, then go to canvas, go to crop and resize, and use resample canvas. And here you can pick a lower number to make your canvas a bit smaller and your iPad will be able to handle more layers. Now let's start drawing those leaves. The size of the brush is set to 6% and the opacity is at 100%. First thing I'll do is just make some curves for the leaves, going outside of the circle. So I'm just trying to decide where these leaves should be. And now that we have these curves, we can draw the rest of the leaf. Starting at the tip, then making this jagged shape. Or you can start at the beginning of the leaf, whatever you prefer. Then again, make this jagged shape. Now for this one, and make sure that you create closed shapes. And finally this one. So I'm closing the shapes here. And then we can drag in the color to fill these leaves. Now it could be that if you drag in the color, that your entire canvas will fill, because using the dry ink brush, it has some tiny gaps. What you need to do then is adjust the fill threshold. You can just drag in the color, then hold your pen and slide to the left or right to adjust the threshold. You see, right now the threshold, it's not okay, so we'll have to do it again. Drag in the color and adjust that threshold until it doesn't spill out on your canvas. And you just tidy up some edges using your dry ink brush. And if you're not content with the shape of some of these leaves, what you could easily do is go to the magic wand and go to liquefy. Now using liquefy set to push, you can just push around these leaves, changing the shape a little bit. Until you are happy with your leaves. I think they're looking good. Now let's just click the brush to get out of the menu, and for our color we'll go to this one right here. And still using the dry ink brush, I would like to add some lines to these leaves. Just following that shape of the leaf. And not go to the tip of the leaf. Just stop right before you reach that tip. What our palm tree needs are some coconuts. Let's create those on a separate layer. Let's click the plus for a new layer. And while still using the dry ink brush, let's pick this color right here and create a circle. Let's draw a circle, hold your pen in place, and tap your finger on the screen to create a perfect looking circle. And drag in the color to fill the shape. And using the arrow right here, you can just move it around until it's in a position that you like. Now you can drag down with 3 fingers and select copy and paste to copy and paste this coconut. Let's put this one over here. And let's drag down with 3 fingers again to copy and paste this one as well. Until we have 3 little coconuts. Just click the arrow to get out of the menu. And then let's go to the first layer that we created. I want to add some texture to this coconut. But I don't want to be painting outside of this circle. So I'll click the layer and use alpha lock. Now all these pixels that we just created, these brown pixels, they are locked. We will only be able to paint on those and not on, well, that checkerboard area. We'll still be using the dry ink brush, but this time we'll use this darker color. Now let's go over the edge of that coconut here. Creating something of a shadow. I also like to add some texture. We'll go to the textures brushes and use the grunge brush. The opacity is set to 75% and the size is at 35%. Now let's just slightly glaze over that coconut. And then we'll move to the next one. Again, we will use alpha lock. Switch to the dry ink brush under inking. And make that shadow. And then we'll switch to the textures brush, the grunge brush, and glaze over for some slight texture. Then we'll move to the final coconut, use alpha lock, and switch to the dry ink brush. Add some shadow again. And finally, go to the textures brushes, use the grunge brush, and add that texture. I can see that we have a little bit of sunshine shining through those coconuts. We can go back to those leaves right here, layer 12. Use that leaf color again, that's the 3rd color right here. Go back to the dry ink brush. And then fill that gap. And you can even adjust the leaves a bit if you like. I want to make this one a bit thicker. This one as well. And we can even make the palm tree a bit bigger perhaps. We can do that by selecting every part of the palm tree. You can do that by sliding to the right on the layers that you need. And then you can go to the arrow, and while you have it set to uniform, you can just drag that handle and make your palm tree just slightly bigger. And then just click the arrow again to get out of that menu. Now there's just one thing that we need. We need a little bit of shadow right here because that sun is behind the palm tree and it will cast a shadow on the sand right here. So we can just go to the sand layer, layer 9. And for our brush, we will go to the spray paint brushes and use the fat nozzle. And for the color, you can just pick this palm tree color. I have the brush opacity set to 50% and the size is set to 10%. And of course, we don't want to be painting outside of that sand. We don't want our paint to show up on the black background. So let's also use alpha lock on this layer. So we'll only be painting on the sand itself. And now let's just add a slight shadow right underneath that palm tree here. And there you have your tropical scene. I hope you had fun following this tutorial. If you did, then don't forget to check out my other You Can Draw This videos as well. Or just get started with these 2 videos over here. I'll see you next time.